Alright, so my talk is called Why Drupal is Like Drupal Is. I think for a lot of designers, first coming to Drupal, there's this question of like, why is it like that? And I'm going to attempt to explain in a pragmatic way. I'm not going to make too many excuses, but I think it's important for anyone doing design, anyone working in Drupal at all, to just sort of understand why, sort of how it got this way, who's responsible, and or who's not responsible, I guess, is the other way, and ultimately kind of what you can do to help. So, first of all, I'm Jeff Robbins. A lot of people know me as the podcast guy. I know your voice, you're the guy on the podcast. Yes, I'm the podcast guy. I also founded a company called Lullabot with my business partner, Matt Westgate. We started in 2006. We'll get to that in a minute. I'm also the guy that wrote the Drupal song. But don't ask me to sing it. I'm just saying.
Until you've had a few beers.
Still, I don't know. It's just... this is me if you want to email me and send me money to sing the Drupal song. Then you can find me on Twitter. There are two. James Walker and I are in a competition to try and get more followers, and he's at a conference in Vancouver, and I know he's got this up on the screen, so I have this up on the screen too, so I won't tell you what James's handle is, but don't tell James that I didn't tell you. And then I used to play in a band, that's why people call me a rock star. We're from Boston, so let's start just by answering what is Drupal? I mean, you're here, you kind of know what Drupal is, but I think it's really good to kind of just start right at the beginning. Most people know Drupal as an open source content management system. Boy, that screen's high up. And a CMS. However, Drupal is also a web application framework. That's all the code underneath. It's a web application framework called Drupal that comes with an application built on it called Drupal. And so, I mean, a web application framework like Ruby on Rails doesn't come with anything pre-built. I think that this actually can sort of be a little bit of a problem for people because it comes with something built on it and they think, there you go, that's what it does. But it's really important to remember that it's a really generalized, not quite as extensive as some of the other web application frameworks that are made just to do that, but it has that underneath the hood, and that really allows a lot of the fundamental changes that modules and themes can make. Is this sort of framework behavior. It's one of the things that, at least historically, has separated Drupal from, well, Joomla in particular and WordPress. It's also really important to remember that Drupal is also a community of web developers. These people, this is Drupal. And it's not something to be taken for granted. Several years ago, one of my past jobs, I worked for Tim O'Reilly back in the early 90s when they weren't quite such a big company, and we were talking about sort of the growth of Drupal and the difficulties that Drupal was having as a community and as a platform, and you know, there weren't enough people to maintain Drupal.org. Drupal.org kept crashing because the servers weren't enough. And so I called up Dries and I said, hey, let's go out and meet with Tim O'Reilly and meet a whole bunch of open source people and kind of see what we can get out of like the group think around this. I mean, there's other open source projects out there. They must have solved these problems. There's no reason for us to kind of reinvent the wheel. Drupal's really good at reinventing the wheel, by the way. And so we went out there and we met with a lot of, you know, people whose names you might have heard of, and we kind of came away really without any answers. And what I came away with was that Drupal in its community is a very unique project a lot of the other projects out there, it's, maybe 15 developers that are mostly employed by one company, and then there's a guy that kind of doesn't leave his house, but he does really good work from his mom's basement, And but Drupal, I mean, with each release of Drupal, there are probably, I don't know the numbers offhand, but I want to say in the last release, probably about 1,000 people who got a snippet of code into the new release of Drupal. That's crazy. I mean, there's just a lot of people working on it. So it's really important not to forget the whole community aspect of things. So I'm going to give a short, subjective history of Drupal. As I was starting to put together these slides, I'm like, this is kind of all stuff that Lullabot worked on. And then I was like, all right, I'm just not going to even pretend that it's an objective history of Drupal anymore. So it all started in Belgium. This isn't Belgium. This is where we are right now. There's Greenland, there's in England, I think, and a little France there. And that's Belgium. At the University of Ghent, where Dries Boytart and his colleagues were going to school, and they wanted to build a message board, a place that they could figure out where they were going to all go to eat, or what time they were going to meet in the cafeteria, or it was really all around eating, I think. And so Dries started looking up domain names for this little village it's kind of really, it was like 2000, but it was kind of a throwback to like the early 90s when everything had to be a metaphor, It's not just a website, it's a town. And if you want to look something up, you click on the library. It's like AOL had pictures all over it. Who I do. And so Dries looked up the word village in Dutch is dorp, D-O-R-P, but he mistyped and typed in drop.org and was delighted to see that it was available. Here was this English word, four-letter word available, and he bought it. And so the website was drop.org, and it quickly became sort of a community of people talking about building communities, and sort of techie people talking about new technology and what could be done with it, which inevitably sort of led to discussing what is the software that runs this website and how can we improve it. And everyone had an idea. Various people started talking about open sourcing the software, and eventually it was open sourced, and that's how Drupal began. So drop.org was late 2000. I think this is December 3rd is the first, well this page is the first version of drop.org in the Wayback Machine, which incidentally I hate now. Like, you think like, oh, I'm going to go find it. It's all broken and stuff. Anyway, but also note that that's the Drupal drop icon. I mean, it was right there. This is the first version of the website that we can find in the history books. Yeah, so I mean, it was there. So this is Drupal.org. This is one of the first Drupal.org pages that I could find. Incidentally, this post on the homepage, written by Moshe Weitzman. Is he here? He's not here. Well, you can tell when you see him. There's some interesting things about this this page. I don't know if you can read this, but it says, I don't know if I can read it, Drupal is the English pronunciation for the Dutch word druppel. Now, D-R-U-P-P-E-L. How would you pronounce that? Probably Drupal.
Yeah.
Now, D-R-U-P-A-L. How are you going to pronounce that? I don't fucking know. Like a drag queen? It is not incidentally pronounced Drupal. It is pronounced Drupal. And if you pronounce it Drupal, people will laugh at you behind your back.
Shady.
Another thing to notice here is the mission statement. To develop a leading-edge open-source content management system that improves the latest thinking in community publishing, knowledge management, and software design, blah, 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 blah. But right at the beginning, Drupal kind of wanted to be everything for everyone. I mean, it wasn't some people who were doing this for commercial purpose. There wasn't a deadline that they needed to get it out by. There wasn't a client that was going to be unhappy if it didn't have exactly the features they wanted. They started building this as an ideological experimentation with what new web technologies and what could be done, and it became about writing and making really, really good, high-quality code, and there wasn't any hurry. You know, they weren't thinking, oh, you know, in a couple of years, Sony's going to be using this, and so we should really, you know. It was kind of all about this like best practices and idealism, and really not driven by commercial timelines. And thus begins what I call the tortoise and the hare race with all the other content management systems out there that kind of had more of a commercial pressure and kind of tended to, you know, kind of grasp at things faster. Whereas Drupal, you know, took a long time to figure out things like images. Why would anyone want to put an image on the web? That's too hard. So 2003, so that was the end of let's go back here. End of 2002 is when Drupal kind of came around. Around the middle of 2003. Oh wait, oh goodness. Okay. This guy, Howard Dean, decides to run for President of the United States of America. He's a pretty good guy, you know. Has a few bad habits. Get a little over-exaggerated, exuberant at times. But a guy named Zach Rosen decides that he is going to help out Howard Dean. He starts a thing called Hackers for Dean, or Hack for Dean, or something like that. And the Dean people kind of find out about it, and they say, why don't you come to New Hampshire, and, you know, maybe you can kind of head up our technology stuff. So Zach starts thinking, okay, well, we should kind of get formal about this. And so he goes in to the PHP IRC chat room. Chat room, remember this is what chat room is. And he types in a question. What is the best PHP CMS? And somebody writes, Drupal. And he says, thanks, and logs out. And downloads Drupal. We have no idea to this day who that person was. No idea. I mean, and they probably don't remember themselves. But Zach built Dean Space on, and Neil Drum, Zach and Neil Drum built Dean Space on Drupal. And they had to hack Drupal a whole bunch to kind of get it to do all the things they wanted. And things were going along real good until Howard Dean got a little over-exuberant and his campaign ended. And thus began Civic Space, which picked up where Dean Space left off. And so here they were with this sort of hacked version of Drupal. And this page, incidentally, certainly no offense to Zach or Neil, they're really, really great guys, but it doesn't mention Drupal anywhere on this page. It says, we got this thing, we're doing this thing, it's going to be awesome, we're going to do hosting and all this. And very, very quickly, Civic Space became a more recognized name than Drupal. I mean, after all, they've done that stuff with Howard Dean, and so a lot of the political people, particularly Democrats, were really interested in Drupal and what could be done with Drupal, because Howard Dean, for those of you who don't remember or might not be from the US, it was like a new thing, this sort of internet, web, social networking. They were getting new, younger people to get excited about Howard Dean and get involved through the web and through mailing lists and stuff like that. And so this was something that the Democrats really wanted to figure out how to harness. And they eventually did. Good for them. So that's Civic Space, 2004. On February 24th, 2005, the first Drupal get-together happened in Antwerp, Belgium. And there are several people pictured here who are still heavily involved in Drupal. That's Dries right there, looking a little bit younger. That's Robert Douglas, looking about the same. Good for him. There's a guy named Karoli Nagisi, whose name I pronounced not quite right, but some people call him Charlie. Most people know him as CHX. They curmudgeon in the IRC chat room. And Adrian Rousseau, father of most things multi-sitey and PHP template and so on and so forth. And Chris Messina, who was working at Civic Space at the time, but has since gone on to run all things Web 2.0 on the web. But I just want to pause here for a moment, because these are the people. There were actually, I mean, these are just some of the people. There were actually 26 people that came. You were there?
Yeah.
Matt, Matt was there.
We've been working for 3-4 years on Drupal and had never met.
This was the first time that most of these people heard each other's voices ever. They didn't know what accents the other people would have, but they did know what words other people spelled wrong. If you haven't spent any time in the Drupal IRC chat rooms, then good for you. I don't know, but yeah. But I mean, this is it. These are the people that started Drupal, and you've got to really hand it to them, because a lot of the ideas, a lot of the motifs, a lot of the concepts and philosophies from back then really started to carry through. This is incidentally, the sprint, the meetup. You can't even really call it a conference at that size, where CCK was concepted. So, in 2005, at the end of 2005, Now Public launched on Drupal. They were kind of one of the first websites to get very serious about things other than Drupal on their website. A lot of times people were putting up Drupal just to sort of experiment with Drupal, but their goal wasn't to do Drupal. Their goal was to build a community of citizen journalism and that type of thing. Ultimately, early in 2007, they were the first Drupal company to raise a big hunk of money, at least that was sort of publicized. They raised $10.6 million in 2007, and they're still doing that. And they employ a lot of really important Drupal developers there. I said it was subjective. In 2006, January 1st, 2006, keeps it easy, Lullabot started. Matt and I had been building websites the previous year and decided we were tired of doing stuff for other people. We were going to figure out how to kind of do this on our own terms. And the first Lullabot podcast happened on January 11th. So within just 11 days, we've done our first podcast. Our next podcast, I think, will be the 75th podcast, the 75th Lullabot podcast, which doesn't count. We have had a whole spin-off podcast that Kent does at DrupalCon. Anyway, so February 2006, just the next month, there was a conference in Vancouver which kind of had a little bit of an identity problem. Some people were calling it DrupalCon, but some people were calling it an OSCMS, Open Source CMS Summit. And so Matt Mullenweg from WordPress came, only to find out that no one else from WordPress were interested. There were a few Joomla developers who came. Was Alfresco at that one? I don't think so. I don't think Alfresco has figured out to come and get burned at our conferences yet. My count, there were about 100 Drupal people there. And this is some of the best I could find was like this camera phone picture. It doesn't really show much, but you know, there's people in a room. I really could have used any picture of people in a room. But you know, it's tagged on Twitter as that, so I'm going to assume that, you know, tagging always tells the truth.
Sure.
Really quickly, once Lullabot had put out our shingle, and I think based on some of our previous work, perhaps my history as a musician, we got a gig working on MTV UK's website, and we flew over to London and helped them build out a website that was sort of interconnected with their online presence. They wanted to create a sort of what they were calling a multi-channel network, where it was a website and a television channel and had a mobile content, and they were all sort of interweaved in interesting ways. It was a really interesting project. But it was really, like, in my opinion, subjectively, the first, like, really big Drupal site to go out there. And really previous to this, it had kind of been, sort of with the exception of Now Public, but they were really a startup. I mean, it wasn't like they were converting over a big community already. It had kind of been sort of a hobbyist platform. I mean, again, this sort of idealistic kind of thing. And all of a sudden, we were on the phone with London, you know, trying to help them figure out how to optimize MySQL and load balancing and all this kind of stuff that Drupal hadn't really thought about too much. But it all got worked out, and it ended up sort of being a, subjectively, sort of a marker that people could refer to. It's like, well, MTV Europe is running this, so, you know, maybe it will run my smaller website. September 22nd, 23rd of 2006, we're now up to 200 people at the Drupal conference. Notice it basically doubles each time, each conference. So we had about 200 people at DrupalCon in Brussels, Belgium. Later that year, we launched a Sony website called, it was actually called a different website at that time, but now it's called MyPlay, video sharing kind of website for Sony, and ultimately helped them build used Drupal's multi-site stuff to build a system for all of their artists so they can roll out artist websites really easily, which previously had been really difficult, and each artist sort of had different technologies going on and stuff like that. So very quickly, Drupal started running Britney.com, which at the time was the #1 search, Britney, on Google. I don't know if it still is. I don't know if she still matters. But I'm not paparazzi, so. Ozzy.com. Might not get as much traffic, but way cooler. JenniferLopez.com, and on and on. I mean, a lot of artist websites are now Drupal, all Drupal all the time, and all run on the same code base. So Sony can upgrade the whole thing all at once. So. Yahoo started using some Drupal in-house and expressed some interest in hosting a DrupalCon. However, they only had space enough for 250 people. And so we said, well, it's Yahoo, you know. And we kind of couldn't believe that Yahoo would only have space for 250 people, so we're like, all right, well, we'll figure it out. It'll be cool at least. So we opened up registration, and within 2 weeks, it was sold out. And we had to close registrations and talk to Yahoo, and there was a whole lot of Yahoos involved. But that happened in March. Lifetime Television was the next thing to launch. But lifetime, I mean, it's a certain demographic, but if you're in that demographic, you watch that channel. And you go to that website to find out what's gonna be on that channel. And so there's not a whole lot of overlap usually in the Drupal community, but this was a big website.
That is so not Jerry O'Connell.
On the other side, so this is television for women. Meanwhile, on the men's side, Playboy.de launched, this is the German Playboy. I spent a lot of time on this website trying to find a screenshot that I could share, and I couldn't really find anything. So I thought, well, just something German, you know. So I went with David Hasselhoff. He's got that sexy thing going on.
Looks like Patrick Duffy in that.
Why Sharpay?
Things started to really pick up in 2007. We had, Drupal, idealistic, socialist, free software, Greenpeace, it's perfect. The hippies love Drupal, and we love Greenpeace. And so that launched in 2007. There, again, parallel to all of this, in the stuff that I'm not being objective about, there was a lot of political stuff being done. Civic Space was continuing to crank out all sorts of stuff. So these are just some of the sites that launched. Harvard and a lot of other universities started using Drupal. Great website. Is Maureen here? I heard someone chirping. No. Amnesty International, sort of akin to Greenpeace. This is a really cool site. If you've never spent any time with this site, this is all Drupal. There's a really, really great example of Drupal's I-18N, let me translate for you, internationalization. It's 18 letters between I and N, internationalization. And as programmers, we just shorten it. And if you click on these links here, according to Morton, you shouldn't actually do it now. But that's a Drupal site. Can we do it? Okay. Anyways, you get the website translated into Arabic, which incidentally is a right-to-left language, or French or Spanish, which look like French and Spanish. But Arabic particularly is really interesting because everything kind of flips around and stuff. Things just really, really picked up. 2008. I'm not even going to attempt. I started putting together slides, and it was 3 in the morning, and I'm going on the Wayback Machine and trying to find websites, and they're all broken, and it's late, and I just wanted to go to bed. So I kind of said, screw it, I'm going to just put up bullet points. So, 4 big websites. You just take my word for it. Drupal 6 came out in 2008. More books. Pro Drupal Development, I think, came out in 2007. That was sort of the first all Drupal book that was Matt co-wrote with John Van Dyke. Good book. Everyone should buy it. More books came out. Dries, who had been in university, just kind of clicking along, and he had a grant that basically precluded him from making money, from having a job in Drupal. While meanwhile, all these companies were sort of sprouting up around him, and he's going like, "It's great, the water's great, hop in, I gotta finish university." And he finally graduated with his PhD, and he co-founded Acquia. That came out in 2008. More big websites, a lot of websites came out in 2008. 2008 was really kind of the turning point for where you could kind of keep track of all of the things that were happening in Drupal. It just became kind of too much. DrupalCon Boston happened. Remember that exponential thing? There were about 900 people came to DrupalCon Boston. Go Boston. More websites came out, and also more websites. Just imagine them. Imagine that I stayed up all night putting together slides of all the wonderful websites. Of
Imagine all the websites. Never.
But I'm just going to jump ahead. So 2008, 2009, DrupalCon DC happened. There was another DrupalCon in there. It was in Europe. I didn't go, so it's subjective. About 1,500 people came to DrupalCon DC. I don't know exactly how many sessions there were. I think they video recorded almost all of the sessions. But I counted 114 videos from DrupalCon. 10 of them were in the design and usability sprint. So that was design and usability. So it was kind of not even just design, it was just less than 10%, which sort of leads you to think that by that number, like 90% of Drupal is not about design. It's idealistic developers. But there was sort of a revolt. Morton can probably tell you all about it. And basically a bunch of these designers sort of found each other in the hall and then started a birds of a feather session basically saying like, WTF, which in real life you say differently. And IRL you say differently. And so they started kind of getting together and agitating, and I think there was drinking involved. It got dangerous. The police may have been called, I'm not sure. But I call this the rise of the designers. This is when the designers she's got paintbrushes.
Nice.
And I think that there were a lot of designers who had been, who were either sort of hiding in Drupal and sort of maybe like Morton came out and finally said, all right, I just can't take it anymore. We're kind of getting there, and you know, we've just got to fix all this stuff. I think that there were a lot of new people coming into Drupal and heard all about the possibilities, probably had paying work, that they were working on Drupal stuff, and showed up, not necessarily because of their own excitement, but maybe other people's excitement that they were supposed to, and so this sort of was kind of a little bit of a turning point for design in Drupal. So let's talk about these designers. What do we give them? Build a website. Not like this one. We want it to look pretty. And they look at this and they say, can we talk about Joomla again? And they probably say, well, here's a book. Learn Drupal and then go build us a website. You're going to need to close Photoshop though, and find a text editor, and you start using IRC. You're gonna love it. And so they take a look at the HTML. They say, all right, this is paid work. I'm gonna figure this stuff out. And they find there's not enough IDs or classes. There's too many IDs or classes. They can't get to what they want to with the CSS.
Really?
Drupal, thankfully, Drupal.org changed from a table-based layout at some point, just because it was getting, it needed to happen. Most designer people, you know, they get pixel perfect in Photoshop, and when they kind of want to bring that into their HTML, and they maybe don't want 18 style sheets loaded on the page, particularly 19. That would be too many. You know? They also might not know what a .tar.gz file is. They also might not want breadcrumbs on every page or a login box on every page. And they get frustrated. I've totally been there. Man, it's just like, it's angry at me. I shouldn't be thinking about this in my sleep, in a sweat. But Drupal doesn't hate you. Drupal doesn't hate designers. I mean, go back to that, those people in Antwerp. They're idealists. They went on Christmas Eve, a Web 2.0 guy, right? You know, they were doing this because they wanted to do the right thing, but I don't know. They just didn't quite know what to do. So Drupal loves you. I think that. I mean, those developers, they knew that they didn't know how to design, right? They said, I can do all sorts of crazy things with PHP, really crazy things with PHP, and but I don't really know. So we'll just create a layer, a presentational layer. That's good practice. Jeffrey Zeldin would like a presentational layer, and so they created the theme system. Now, I'm reminded there was a sci-fi episode, and maybe somebody can help me figure out what this was, if it was like Twilight Zone or Star Trek or something, but there's like a human guy crashes on a planet in his spaceship, and it crashes, it's all messed up, and there's like a really advanced civilization of non-human beings that live on this planet, and they find the guy, and they say, let's put him back together, but they don't know what part goes where, you know? They do their best, but it kind of ends up kind of all sort of Frankenstein together, you know? Or like there's like a dog on the plane, or on the spaceship with him, and the dog's in there too, you know? Like, and the guy wakes up and he says, you know, like, I mean, is this? I mean, I guess it's sort of apt that the Drupal logo kind of looks like an alien, right? You know, I mean, they're really doing their best. They just don't quite understand what designers want, what designers are made up of, you know? And so there's sort of this idea of like, just kind of pawn it off to the theme layer, right? Like, yeah, we'll make all the functionality, you guys, you figure out the theme layer. We'll just keep it abstract. And they built what they knew, which is PHP, which, I don't know. I mean, it depends on where you are as a designer. If you, I mean, there was a time that I drew the line at PHP. There was a time I drew the line at the command line. There was a time I drew the line at command line MySQL. And all the things I've learned that I kind of wish I didn't have to, but now I can try and teach other people. So I think, I mean, there's that aspect of things. I mean, Drupal really wants to do its best. It just kind of needs to understand designers better.
That episode, there was an episode of Star Trek, the original series, called The Cage, where a woman crash lands on a planet and the aliens don't know how to put her back together, and they have some reference from books.
There you
she's
go.
Horribly deformed.
And she just speaks lines from movies or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. I like it. I like it. I have no idea how you found that out, but I like it.
I couldn't remember the name of the episode, but I found it on Google.
Found it on a Drupal site, you fool!
So another thing to remember is that Drupal is a toolkit. Drupal is not a product. WordPress is a product. WordPress does what WordPress does when you take it out of the box. You can kind of hack it to do other things. You can alter it and change it, and there's sort of plugin kinds of things. But WordPress is really made for blogging. Drupal looks like blogging software out of the box, but it's not. And so there's sort of this inherent problem that that Drupal is really generalized and doesn't make any assumptions about what the content is going to be. I mean, blogging software is kind of, to some extent, the simplest kind of CMS you can get, right? It's got two fields. It's got a title and it's got a body. And maybe it's got a excerpt, teaser, whatever that platform decides to call it. And that's kind of what you have to play with. Drupal, the idea conceptually is you could make a video content management system with it. You could make an audio content management system. You could make a, insert name of some sort of web technology here, and you could manage it with Drupal. So it's very abstracted in that way, and sort of tries to be this all things to all people. But at the same time, by doing that, becomes nothing to any one individual person. You kind of need to know what you want to do. You need to know what Drupal can do in order to be able to do that. I've got this thing I've been saying a lot recently. Content defines design, which I think is sort of a corollary to form follows function. That usually the design of the website is related to the type of content that is going to be on the website. Is it going to be videos? Is it going to be blog posts? Is it going to be long New York Times articles? Is it going to have long headlines or short headlines? I mean, this is all stuff that the designer kind of needs to know. How is it going to be used? Who's going to use it? Is it going to be the lifetime demographic? Is it going to be the Sony demographic? Is it going to be the Drupal.org demographic? And that sort of defines what level of design what you need to do design-wise, or in the case of Drupal.org, you can get away with not doing, perhaps. And it's really difficult to design when you don't know what the content's going to be. So to create a generalized design and contribute it back to Drupal, it's really difficult because you need to make some assumptions about what the design's going to be, or what the content's going to be, before you can create the design. And so what you end up getting is somewhat sort of a middle-of-the-road approach, try and split the difference, sort of a blog plus kind of thing, a blog and you can put polls on it, or things like that. And so it's just sort of really difficult. And then there's this sort of like begets like, thing where Drupal's all full of these PHP developers, and they don't have any good designs, and so designers keep shying away, and so no designers come in to kind of start to set those precedents, set those examples that other people can follow. Incidentally, the Drupal community is amazing at following patterns, oftentimes to a fault. So it's just sort of a chicken and the egg situation, and I think we're starting to see it crack. That's a horrible metaphor. Is the chicken cracking or the egg? Either way, it's not good. The chicken won't be born if the egg cracks, so I guess the egg cracks at the right time. Anyways, so we kind of need more developers. We need more design in Drupal in order to attract more design in Drupal. I mean, most of those websites that I talked about are big websites. I mean, they needed to go with a big thing anyways. And they were going to have their staff design it to their specs anyways. It's the sort of middle road people, the people who want to, build a store for their, an online presence for their little store in some little city somewhere. Those are the people who really fall between the cracks with Drupal. Is Drupal over-engineered? A lot of stuff is really difficult. We just got finished teaching a theming workshop, and we also put out a new theming DVDs. There's my plug. There's a lot of stuff that you sort of sit down to explain, and it's like, okay, so you need to, first of all, put everything into an array, and then call this function to get it back out of the array, and then print it on your page with this other function, and then there's the whole theming. Don't forget to call theme function, and then you translate the text. Don't forget to translate the text. And it's complicated, but I don't know. What do you get for it? I mean, it's become that oftentimes, especially for designers, building a Drupal site has become a subtractive process. It's not what I want to add to Drupal, which is the way that it is with most other platforms. It's what I want to take away. I don't want the tabs there. I don't want the login form on every page. I don't want a river of news on my homepage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it becomes sort of this sculpting process, which is different. I mean, I think again, it's just sort of, you need to sort of understand where Drupal came from and where Drupal's strengths are. I'm starting to run out of time. I'm going to just really quickly run through Drupal's conceptual layers. This is the over-engineering, but it's good stuff. So at the bottom, you've got the database. This is where Drupal stores pretty much everything. Everything goes to the database. It's managed in the database. It's good stuff. You don't have 10,000 HTML pages like you used to have with WordPress, with movable type, when it would generate all the pages, or God forbid you wrote them all yourself. I know I certainly did. You've got Drupal. Drupal speaks to the database. And then you've got this thing called the theme layer, the theme engine. That's what this whole week or weekend is gonna really focus on, is the theme layer and theming. Theme layer talks to Drupal, but it doesn't talk to the database. This is a good thing. This theoretically makes it easier, more secure. A lot of good stuff happens here. You got all the core stuff that goes in, all the bootstrap and core modules and contrib modules and custom modules. All that stuff is all about the functionality of Drupal. Drupal's presentational stuff, the page templates, the node templates, the CSS files, the template.php, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All that stuff is all the stuff that basically the developers have said, here, you figure this out. It'd be nice not to have to figure out anything. I mean, wouldn't it be nice to have like a Dreamweaver extension for Drupal? You know, that'd be nice. Photoshop plugin. I'll put a Drupal site. So, is it worth the effort? I've certainly found it to be worth the effort. I mean, I don't know if I would build a blog, just a simple blog site using Drupal. I mean, there's certainly, as a Drupal developer, it's not only refreshing and simple to do things like even just creating a static HTML page. It's like, I created a form and I didn't have to make an array. I mean, Drupal can be really rewarding, and once you've kind of done that, you know that because you know the client's going to do this. Can we add a message board? We're thinking about e-commerce. E-commerce to the website, or ratings. Can we do some ratings? I really like the way Amazon does that. I want an e-commerce with Amazon, and it's always that like, take this part of this website and this part of this website and this part of this website that just launched. Could you put some Wolfram Alpha in it?
What we call one of the sites that we like to call it my face too messy.
Yeah, it's like, so it was late last night, and I had to rethink this slide. Climbing a mountain. I mean, we talk about Drupal being more like Lego pieces, and it's really getting more this way. I think the mountain thing, I'm not giving Drupal a fair shot there. Theoretically, Drupal can and should be like Lego building blocks for building websites. I mean, this guy's obviously spent a long time building this, but like, you know, I mean, that's what it should be, is this process that's straightforward and understandable. And I think that Drupal's starting to get there. There's really a lot of focus on usability and user experience, and just we're seeing more and more of that. And it's generally really good stuff. The work that I've been seeing happening in that area is really, really good. I think it's important to remember that open source is trust. What do I mean by this? When a developer puts their code out there for free, they've spent a lot of time on this code, and they're going to possibly get critiqued. They're going to have people come in and tear it down or alter it, fork it off. I didn't like your version. I wrote a different thing. It's called you know, your module, the next generation. And, you know, and so, I mean, there's like trust there. It's sort of, you know, you kind of understand that. And vice versa, you need to feel like you can trust these people that built this software, and where do they come from, and what do they do? I mean, ultimately, you need to sort of kind of believe in the like basic human good, that when large groups of people like this get together to build software, they're going to build it good and not build it evil. All those like James Bond movies, I don't know where they find all those henchmen, right? I mean, it's like they've got like lots and lots of henchmen, like, you know, I mean, it's what I do. I think that it's also really important when working in open source to remember your gratitude. You just got an entire e-commerce package for free, and it kind of works.
It didn't blow up.
I mean, your website mostly kind of works, almost, and it's all free stuff that you put together, you know? I mean, in like, you know, a weekend, you got most of the website done, and it's only going to take you like the next 3 or 4 months to finish it off. And, you know, I think, but it's important to appreciate that and appreciate the people, and, you know, and in that same vein, to try and give back as much as you can. And I think that as we've got more designers that are starting to understand that and starting to be able to have that communication and understand that they're part of the community by using the software. It's not them. They don't hate you. They hate other people that come in the chat room. They hate those people, but they don't hate you because you're a designer. They just hate you because you're asking stupid questions. they don't hate you. I hate this stuff. But anyways, I think that Drupal design is getting a lot better, and you can help. And I really want to encourage everyone who is design-centric and new. There's a really wonderful sort of Zen beginning to seeing all of the ways in which Drupal is angry at you and is broken, and pointing them out, because for those of us who have been in Drupal for a long time, we don't see those things anymore. It's like, oh yeah, you want to do that thing, you click up here, you click down here, you click over there, you click down here, and then you look for it's called something that you don't expect it to be called. Here it is, there you go, you know? And you know, and I think as those things can be pointed out, and suggestions for how those can be improved, and people to come in with a lot more big ideas around design and around usability and all that kind of stuff. I think Drupal is just going to get better, and it will just become easier and easier building blocks that really that benefit everyone. It can get in that way complicated enough that it can become simple again.